Welcome back. So we have seen now the specifics of the skeleton from the front. Now we're going to move on to the skeleton from the back. I already drawn in the basic shapes of the skeleton. We don't need to go over them again, but we'll see how we have the ovoidal shape of the skull, the skeleton, the skull of the head, as an upside down egg. Then we're going to have the ovoidal shape of the rib cage as an upright egg, the bucket for the hips, and then legs and forearm. What I want to do now is I want to go more into the specifics of the various portions, the various parts of the skeleton. And I'm going to start with the skull. Turning around. Actually, yeah, we can see from the back like this. So we're going to see that this portion here, where the cervical spine connects with the cranial mass, is about 1/3 of a head up from the bottom of the chin. So remember, from the bottom of the chin to the base of the nose is about 1/3 of one head. No? So I move this back just to find the reference, and I see that pretty much I have the same distance in here, 1/3 of one head. So let's draw one line here at the base of the skull at 1/3 of a head. Okay, so this one will be 1/3 of one head. This is going to be the base of the skull. I want to now to find a very important structure in the head, and it's going to be the mastoid process. This bump in here is the mastoid process. I need to know where it is because see this hole in here, this is the ear hole, and from this muscle, this bone in here, I'm going to have a muscle, the sternocleidomastoid, coming down like this. So I want to know where this is. This is an important landmark, okay? So let's put a dot on it, and this is going to be the mastoid process. And I'm going to draw it, actually, let me put the skeleton like this and see it from behind. You see how these two bumps protrude a little bit below the base of the skull. So in my schematic view of the skull, I'm going to have here a bump in here and a bump in here. We've seen that the width of the spine at the level of the skull, the head is about 1/4 of a head. And then as I get down to the hips, this portion in here, as the spine connects with the sacrum, is going to be almost 1/4 of a head. I'm sorry, almost half a head. So it's going to be widening like this, okay? So I have this point in here. Remember these 2 points in here that give me the point of where the rib cage touches the bottom of the box. I'm going to have the equivalent in here and in here. Now, from the back, I want to create this curvature, you see from the back, that gives me the lower margin of the 12 ribs. Okay, as you can see, this notch in here is going to be much smaller than this notch in here. No, makes sense. In here, I'm going to have the intestine that needs to protrude or move, come out, etc. In here, I don't have that need. So this portion in here, this notch in here, we can say it's about 1/4 of a head, a little bit more, 1/3 of a head. Okay, so let's take 1/3 of a head, move it up here, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up with this from these 2 corners and create the posterior inferior margin of the rib cage. Now I need to know where let's go back to the skeleton here. Now we'll see how there is a ridge in here, a change of angle between the ribs coming this way and the ridge moving in this way. I had to identify this region here because this region here will help me in positioning the scapula, okay, the vertebral margin of the scapula. So if I keep this ridge going, I see how it would end at this lower point of the rib cage. So good for me. I'm going to start from the top. First, I identify the base of the neck, which is half a head. Okay, so let's see if I have it right. Half a head. Yeah, a little bit more than that, slightly. Half a head like this. Now, from this point in here, I had to go down to this point in here, merge these two points, 1 and 2. And what I've done now, I identified this change of angle. See that? This change of angle that the ribs here have in the back. So I want to position now the scapula. The scapula, the length of the scapula is going to be about a little bit smaller than one hand. So I'm going to do some judo with this guy here and then back. Put the scapula here. See, compare the hand to the scapula, and I know that the hand is almost one head, okay? It's 7/8. So the scapula is slightly smaller than the hand. So I'm going to take my hand, make it a little bit smaller, and this is going to be the size of the scapula. Or another thing I could do is take one head, move it down, okay? The scapula is going to be just below this line here of the second head, okay? So let's use this. It seems like I have a better measurement from here. So again, one head, two head. This is the line of the second head. Just below the line of the second head, I'm going to position along this region here a dot. This dot in here will represent this point in here, the lower margin of the scapula. So from here, I go up to the center. You guessed it. We have seen already how we did the same thing to the front, okay? And then from here, I'm going to go up to the top of the rib cage here. This gives me a very, very basic schematic outline of the scapula. Now I want to add more details, be more specific. So if we look at the next structure, important structure in the scapula, we're going to see this bone in here going across like this. This is called the spine of the scapula, and it's going to culminate into the acromion. This portion here, suspended, is going to be the acromion of the scapula. Okay, so I want to look at this forming here. Again, let's use the center of the head of the humerus as our bearing point, and I'm going to see if I draw in a horizontal line coming from the center of the head of the humerus, and I'm going to have the spinal scapula beginning just right there. Good for me. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this line, this point here, the center of the head of the humerus, move it in, and where this line intersect the vertebral margin of the scapula, I'm going to have the spine of the scapula begin going up this direction. So as you can see here, this spine is going to go over, above the head of the humerus, creating some sort of roof, some sort of protection for the head of the humerus, okay? So let's do this up diagonally like this. And then I can, from this corner here, I come up with the 90-degree angles toward this line in here and create the scapula, okay? So I'm going to repeat the same thing on the other side quickly. So find the line of the second head along this line of the ridge, dot, connect, come up. From the center here, connect with the top. From this point in here, go up, above the head of the humerus, spine, acromion. And then the upper portion of the scapula. And here is your scapula. So now let's look at the hips. So the hips, we want to see how complicated this forming here is. I don't really need all of this detail. What I want to do, I want to define this point in here, the posterior superior iliac spine, and this point in here, the ischium or ischiatic bone. This is, I call it sitting bone because this is the bone you'll be sitting on, and it will be padded by the gluteus. So the gluteus is going to come down like this, and you're going to cover this muscle, this bone in here, and go over the ischium. Okay, it's going to be important to recognize where this is once we want to draw the muscle, because this will give us an idea of how big the gluteus has to be. Okay, people tend to do it, the gluteus too small. So anyway, now I'm going to take this point in here, and then from here bring a line straight up like this, and define the iliac wing, 1 and 2. So left and right iliac bone. This portion in here is going to be the ischium, okay? And then what I want to show now is the sacrum. So the sacrum, we can start about halfway between the line of the middle and the top here. It really depends on the tilt of the pelvis, so we're not going to be too specific, but the bottom of the sacrum here is going to be kind of at the level of the center of the head of the femur here. And then below this, I'm going to have the vestigial tail, the coccyx here, triangular space. I'm going to see to the front here, this is going to move forward. This bone in here is going to move forward, see? And this is called the ischio-pubic ramus, because it is a bone that connects the ischium with the pubic bone, okay? So I'm going to create this triangular shape in here. To the front, I'm going to have the pubic bone, and this portion here will be removed from me. I don't worry about this too much. So these are the hips as seen from behind. This is the sacrum. And that's the rib cage. I'm going to outline the scapula now so we can differentiate them better from the rib cage, okay? This. Okay. So now we're going to take a closer look at the vertebrae. Okay. So we're going to have we're going to start with a thoracic segment. Okay. In this segment in here, which is the segment that is comprised between the first and 12 ribs, we have, of course, 12 vertebrae, okay? So I want to find an easy way to subdivide all that mass of bones and spikes that you see in there and reduce it just to basic measurements. So I take this length in here, okay, from the top of the rib cage down to the bottom of the rib cage in here, and I'm going to divide it in half, okay? Let me see if it's half. Yep. And then I'm going to divide it in half again. And now what I do, I have 4 times 3, 12. So I'm going to take each segment and divide it in 3 equal parts. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. Okay, so now, first, second, third, fourth. I'm going to draw all the vertebrae as just basic rectangular shape or cylinders, okay? Now, so this is going to be the thoracic portion of the spine. The cervical portion of the spine has 7. So I'm going to try to eyeball it, just do it just like it without subdividing it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, okay? And then the lumbar portion is going to have 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so the fifth lumbar in reality would be hidden behind the top margin of the sacrum. In here we see it, we see the posterior part, but it would be, you see how it comes below this superior margin of the sacrum. So we wouldn't see the whole thing, so in theory we would have to draw it a little bit thinner, but we don't want to be so physical now. We just need 5 vertebrae, and for our purpose it's going to be sufficient. So good. So now we can move on to the next view, which is going to be the side view of the skeleton. So let's see how I can simplify the shape of the head from this side. I know that this lower third in here, okay, is going to give me the base of the skull and the point where the nose is. The nose is going to be here, sticking out. So I'm going to draw, so far I have drawn just one single ovoidal shape for the head, but in here I'm going to subdivide the skull in 2 portions. So one is going to be the cranial volume. I'm going to draw an egg put down like this horizontally. Okay, so this is the cranial volume, and this is going to be the facial portion of it. Okay, this is the face. Okay, so what we can do, we can draw an ovoidal shape like this, keeping in mind that the widest point is not going to be through the middle, it's going to be slightly posterior to the middle, and then this facial mass in here, this facial volume in here, that is going to represent the face and is going to give me the jawline here, okay, like this. So as you see, the jawline will develop from the center line of gravity forward. So I want to notice now, I want to mark now where these bumps in here, remember the mastoid process here is, okay, because this point in here will give me, this mastoid process will give me the position of the ear hole. Actually, let's turn it the other way. You see how this is the ear hole, okay? So once I identify that, I know where to position my ear. So the ear hole is going to be above the mastoid process, behind the jawline, okay? So now let's move down to the rib cage, and I'm going to draw an ovoidal shape, but this time I'm going to start drawing it a little bit at an angle like this, okay? So I'm going to start going after, you see how this box is pretty straight, and all these boxes are going to be piled up one on top of the other one. As we move, this is just for the sake of understanding, learning in an easy way the basic volumes and proportion of the body and how they relate to each other. But now, because we're moving toward a more organic shape, we want to see how these volumes, the distinct volumes, are going to be connected with each other. So the rib cage is going to be angled like this, likely the top slightly backward and the bottom slightly forward. In here, I can position the hips now. I'm going to keep them simple first, and then I'm going to make them more, a little bit more organic. Okay, this is going to be the bucket of the hips. I want to see how this angle here, see, is moving down at an angle forward like this toward the anterior superior iliac spine. So what I'm going to do is, aiming for the anterior superior iliac spine, which is at the upper quarter, I'm going to create a line that goes down like that, okay? So to this forming here, I want to have the sacrum connected to this. So let's look at the sacrum. We're going to put the sacrum in here, okay? It looks like a C form. And if you remember, the sacrum ends up about at the lower quarter here, okay? So it's a little bit like a tail or something. So if I now consider this forming here with the sacrum and everything, I could see how this volume here would have an angle, would be angled like that, especially once I put the glutei in there, okay? So I see that the volume of the rib cage is oriented this way. The axis is going to be oriented this way. The main axis of the hips are going to be oriented this way as a general mass, no? And this angle created between these two masses, these two forms, is going to be different between male and female. So we're going to go over that later on. So for now, we take it off and we don't worry about that anymore. So now what I want to do is I want to position the my femur. I want to connect my femur with the hips. So the acetabulum, this is the name. The acetabulum is the name of this cavity in here. Okay. Acetabulum means small vinegar cup, and for whatever reason, it reminded the anatomist of this small vinegar cup they found in archaeological digs. So this acetabulum is positioned to the front of the center line of gravity and above the line of the middle, okay, to the front. Now, I find the center of this, okay. I need to know what the center of this is, because this, remember here, is going to give me the top of the trochanter. So the trochanter is going to be just below this line in here, given by the center of the head of the femur. But it's not going to be at the same level. It's going to be slightly posterior here. Okay? So there is an anti-version of the head of the femur compared to the trochanter. See that? So they are not going to be entering the neck of the femur is not going to be entering the acetabulum perpendicular, but at an angle like that. We want to be aware of this, because later on when I put the muscles, this is something I want to be aware of. Okay. So now, this is the trochanter. Okay. I can connect the trochanter with the neck of the femur like this. Okay. Now what I want to do, I want to draw the diaphysis, the shaft of the femur. So from here, I'm going to come down with a line, a straight line like this. This line here is going to be the same line as the center line of gravity. Okay. Later on, we're going to see more in detail how the center line of gravity relates to all these landmarks we have seen now. So in here, I'm going to draw a golf club. So think of this as a golf club. It's going to be easier, okay, like this. And then, because you see how this portion here develops posteriorly, see that? And this portion here is fairly straight, okay. So below this, the head of the golf club, I'm going to put my bar of soap in here, okay. And instead of having the shin going down straight as the basic notional space would imply, I'm going to be more organic, and I'm going to see that the shin is going to come in a little bit, inward a little bit. Let's see if it's visible. In this, the shin here is going to move slightly back a little bit, okay? So I want to maintain that. So I find the middle of the articular plane of the ankle, and from the top, from the front in here, I'm going to move back. That is going to give me the direction of the shin. Then I fill it in a little bit, okay? Fill it in a little bit. So I have now the tibia. Okay, so I had to add the fibula. So the fibula, as we can see, as you already mentioned before, will start from the posterior inferior corner of the box of the head of the tibia, okay? And it's going to move on to this side, to the lateral portion of the foot in here, well below the articular plane, okay? So this is why in here I didn't draw the median malleolus, because the median malleolus is going to be hidden by the profile of the foot. No, I'm not going to see that. But in here, I'm going to put the head of the fibula or perone. Fibula or perone, the same thing. And then I'm going to so I'm going to have the starting point, and then I'm going to have the ending point. The ending point is kind of overlapping with the point where the tibia joins the foot. And I'm going to see that there is a specific behavior of these two bones. They kind of converge toward the center. The tibia is going to be slightly anterior, and the fibula slightly posterior, but they start one to the back, one to the front, and they kind of converge 1 and 2 like that, okay? So now from here, we want to go back up here at the shoulder and see how the scapula and the humerus articulate together. So first I need the head of the humerus. The head of the humerus, as we had seen before, is going to be just below the line of the jugular fossa, okay, just below this line here. And then it's going to be posterior to the center line of gravity, behind that. So here, I'm going to put the head of the humerus, okay? So now I want to find one head down. I'm going to find from the chin here, I'm going to find where the tip of the lower tip of the scapula is, and from this point in here, I'm going to merge this point here with the center of the head of the humerus. From here, I want to move up toward the top of the rib cage, more or less. Then remember before when we did the spine of the scapula, it was at the level of the center of the humerus, no? The head of the humerus. The same thing, I bring it out in here. Now I know that here, at this level here, I'm going to have a change of angle from this to this. And that is going to be my scapula. So you see how now I am adding to the profile of the rib cage that I had before. So now this angle in here becomes even more evident because I have added a little bit more volume to the top posterior portion of the rib cage. So now let's see how the cervical spine connects with the rib cage. So the anterior portion of the cervical spine will just touch the center line of gravity without being cut by it. And then, so you're going to move, then toward the end, you're going to move in toward the rib cage. So posterior, the same thing, okay? This is going to be the cervical spine. At the bottom, we move down to the lumbar portion of the spine. I'm going to see how the spine is thicker and it's a little bit curved forward like this. So I'm going to have the center line of gravity here cutting a little bit into the thickness of the lumbar portion of the spine. So, but not a lot. Most of the spine will develop behind the center line of gravity, okay? So we see how now we create this nice sinuous curve of the body, okay? See how we're getting really into the feeling of some organic form, okay? So for now, I don't want to put the humerus in here because actually we could put it, we just move the humerus forward. So from here, instead of having the humerus going over here and cover this portion here, I'm going to have the humerus moved forward a little bit, flexed a little bit, the front. And as I get at the end of the rib cage, remember in here, I'm going to have my elbow and the forearm, okay, like this. So I want to see if this length is appropriate to the length of the forearm, and remember the law of the tapering, no? Slightly shorter. Okay, so good enough, close enough. And the hand is going to come down like this because I don't have any more space, so we're going to put it down like that, okay? 7/8, all right? Okay. So now as a homework assignment, I would like you to practice with this exercise. This will tell you what you remember, what you know, and what you don't know, so you can look it up. So you're going to draw the basic volumes of the skeleton, the way we have depicted in here. And I like to start with the rib cage because it's the bigger mass, the bigger volume. So you're going to start with an ovoidal shape like this for the rib cage. And then over here, try to kind of follow your instinct, see if it looks good. No? Over here, you're going to put the head, and over here, you're going to put the hips. No? So avoid a bucket, egg, and egg. Then what you do, you go back and then you measure the head. Okay, so this is my universal measurement. See if the head fits 2 times between here and here. Pretty good. And here, pretty good. So now I have 1 for the head, okay, 2 for the rib cage, minus the neck and minus the waist, and then 1 for the hips. Once I have these basic forms on, now I can be more specific. Now that the relative proportion with each other is correct, I can be more specific. So in here, I'm going to draw my rib cage more carefully, the base of the neck, the hips, okay, and even give it maybe a tilt. No, so if I look at the hips, I see, all right, the hips are going to be tilted this way or that way. The rib cage is going to be tilted this way or that way. We're going to see this in more in detail later on. Then to this, you're going to attach arms, thinking, okay, that's the jugular fossa. Below that, I'm going to have my arm. Arms, how long? To the end of the rib cage, here and here, okay? Forearm, how long? To the level of the pubic bone, here and here, okay? Legs. So at this point, I would like to introduce an easy way of drawing quickly the figure and using my knowledge of the fact that the pubic bone is the middle. So I'm going to take the midpoint in here, bring it down in here, and now I know that's where the feet are going to be. No, this point my feet, the bottom of the figure is going to be. So now, from above the pubic bone down to here, I'm going to have my legs. Okay, so going back to the basic measurement, from here to the articular plane. Now we're going to take 1.5 heads. So I take 1. From the bottom of the hips here, 1, and then half. So this is going to be the articular plane of the knees okay? This is the thigh, and now from here down to the bottom is where the feet are going to be. So see how quickly I can build my figure by just using these basic measurement and basic proportion. Let me clean this up, it's a little bit messy. So this, even if you're using, if you're copying from life, it permits you to lock in the basic proportion, the basic volumes of the figure, and without getting lost into the details of the nostrils, of the eyelids, of those little beautiful details that the body has, but they can be very deceiving. Instead, you're going to be focusing on the structural aspect of the form, where we see how this volume is angled and how this volume relates to this volume and what volume this angle is at, this volume is at, okay, and how this relates to this volume here, okay? So after that, this being the axial skeleton, we're going to move to the appendicular skeleton, where we're going to position arms and legs. From here, you can start building up the figure more realistically, and we're going to move toward that with the next lesson, which is going to be about the muscles. So this is pretty much it. Now you go ahead and try this yourself as homework. Do a few figures, 3, 4, 5. Get acquainted with these basic proportions, and then post them on the platform and I'll be happy to give you feedback. So for the next lesson, we're going to introduce the muscles of the front. Till then, see you and ciao.